Good afternoon. I'm Elizabeth Coffer-Bush, co-director of the Center for American Studies here at Christopher Newport University. Thank you for coming today for our banned books lecture. We do a lecture every year, starting, I think this is our third, so it's a fairly new series, but to help remind us of the importance of free speech, free expression, free press, on campuses especially. The Center for American Studies is dedicated to teaching America's founding principles in history and national security. If you would like any additional information about it, I'm here. You can ask me afterwards. But I have the distinct pleasure today of introducing our guest speaker, Dr. Elizabeth Amato, an associate professor of political science for the Department of Social Science at Gardner-Webb University. She's actually the political science professor right now. She runs the entire political science program. Dr. Amato earned her BA at Berry College in Rome, Georgia, and her master's and PhD at Baylor University in political science. Before joining her current job, she taught at James Madison College at Michigan State University. She teaches constitutional law, the presidency, Congress, American political parties. You can see why she's a kind of Department of One, modern political philosophy, and she also advises the Pre-Law Society there. Dr. Amato's interests for research include the study of happiness, ancient and modern political thought, literature and film, American political thought, and the American presidency. She's published articles, book chapters, and essays on these subjects, and is author of The Pursuit of Happiness in the American Regime, Political Theory and Literature. She also was one of my very first students ever when I taught at Berry College before I came here. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Amato.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be invited here today and to celebrate. Do we celebrate Banned Books Week? That seems like an odd thing to do. But we are here. Maybe, how about this? We are celebrating having difficult discussions, celebrating free speech, and maybe we are celebrating Harry Potter. We'll see. Anyway, okay, here. Let me figure out how I can see here. This is the cover picture. Let's get to the first beginning here. Yeah, this is fun. I'm going to be so tempted to just constantly walk out from behind. I can't stand still whenever I talk. So this is going to be a real, okay. It's like such a challenge for me. Okay, so, maybe. Yeah, okay, so this is just Harry Potter and his popularity, right? That's what I'm talking about here. This is the first one. Seriously, Harry Potter is massively popular. As I note here, there's over 500 million copies of the book sold worldwide. This is the best-selling series ever. I should not walk away from the clicker. That's a bad idea. There we go. It's been translated into over 80-plus languages. I know that also includes like Latin and Greek. And the original 8 films generated nearly $8 billion. Harry Potter is just a massive fandom. It really is one of the massive properties or IPs we talk about fandom, the merch, the theme parks, the conventions, the fanfic. It is extraordinary. I actually was just at Target over the weekend. Oh, you're gonna do that, so I can actually look. Hi. Okay. And all of the Halloween costumes dedicated to Harry Potter, there are Harry Potter themed Hershey Kisses. They are adorable. You need to go and get some. Right, and so it's hard to convey, especially because I know most of the audience is quite younger, and so you've pretty much grown up with Harry Potter being around your whole life and all the books and all the movies being out, but it is hard to convey the excitement of when these books were first being released. Those are people lined up for a midnight book release. To go to a physical, that's probably like a Borders or a Barnes & Noble or some other bookstore that doesn't even exist anymore. But like people would dress up for these things. They were celebrations. Like there was just so much like Potter love when these books were released, and it just got bigger and bigger every single time another one was released or even another movie came out. I mean, just extraordinary things. And then there's, of course, J.K. Rowling herself. Her actual name is Joanne. The K doesn't stand for anything. Whenever she was getting published, they wanted to kind of slightly hide her identity as a woman, so she went with J.K., just kidding, Rowling. And her story is almost as legendary or as magical as Harry Potter's. She had what was often called at the time a sort of feminist Cinderella story. She was a single mother who transformed her life through writing. She rose from poverty to global fame through the Harry Potter series. And I mean, the books themselves and their publication have an awesome history, right? I mean, literally rejected by 12 publishers. Can you imagine being the people who had said no to Harry Potter? Oh, I love justifying that one. And the first print was only 500 copies. These books just caught on like wildfire. There we go. And they were praised for teaching things like courage and loyalty and empathy and inclusion of outsiders. This is certainly, we know, not always the controversy today, but certainly when they first came out, here's where we were. But Harry Potter is also consistently ranked as among the most challenged books in the United States in the 21st century. It's kind of extraordinary, and there's really been two waves of accusation against Harry Potter. These two waves, or these two sets of accusers, have come from very different perspectives. There we go. Yeah, there we go. Harry Potter's first accusers. For those of you paying attention, this is a subtle allusion to Socrates and the Apology. By subtle, I'm also announcing it right here, just in case anybody would not miss it. But what is often forgotten is that this first group of accusers, this happens in the late 90s, the early 2000s. The objections are coming from largely religious communities. Various stripes or Christian groups, and also some Islamic groups. They sought to ban the Harry Potter books. And what they're accusing the books of is promoting witchcraft, right? I mean, they're learning sorcery and witchcraft. Also the occult, and generally speaking, corrupting the youth. And these concerns are coming from these communities from a place of wanting to protect children, their moral and their religious formation. And in many places in the United States, in certain communities, with local school boards and whatnot, these religious groups would try to pressure the libraries from removing the books or not putting the books into the curriculum. And that right there is an actual book burning. I know, you can sometimes still really just burn books. We shouldn't. All right. And so there really was in the early 2000s this kind of fight or legal battle to keep Harry Potter in school libraries. And the flashpoint for all of this, like I said, it's happening in other places in the United States, but the main case arises out of Cedarville, Arkansas, where parents pushed for the removal of Harry Potter from the school libraries. Now, they didn't succeed in getting it removed, but what they did succeed in doing was having restricted access. So the books would be kept behind, by this point, I think there's only like 2 or 3 of the books out, but it would be behind the desk, and in order to access it, you would need like a parental permission slip. Go to mom and dad, get a permission slip to go read Harry Potter at the library. So this does lead to a case, Counts v. Cedarville, that comes out the following year. This ruling ends up protecting the books, keeping them in the school library, not just in the school library, but broadly in, oh no, I like, the battery just fell out. I am a mess. I will. Yeah,
protected the books. Essentially what the court said is that even having the books available with a permission slip, that is still violating the student's rights. If you've ever studied Tinker v. Des Moines, then you know that the Supreme Court has previously said that school children do not shed their rights upon entering the schoolhouse gate. And the Supreme Court, or the court argues here that this is still burdening their freedom of speech because the access is still quite limited. All right. And in fact, this ruling has turned out to be quite important and is getting even a second wind through the courts. As you guys may be aware, there's a lot of efforts in the United States today to keep LGBTQ titles out of school libraries, and it is this case that is being cited in defense of keeping those books in the circulation, or in the library circulation. Harry Potter has a second set of accusers. And these second set of accusers shifts from the content to the creator herself. And this has to do with Rowling's very public statements on women and transgendered rights. And so the thing is, canceling Rowling or efforts to cancel her or criticize her has, of course, entailed consequences for the books themselves. And yeah, some independent booksellers have pulled series from the shelves. No major bookseller has, but some independent booksellers have. There have been plenty of online calls for boycotts. Fewer children are encouraged to read Harry Potter. And I think this is maybe even a bigger deal than we sometimes realize. The early praise of Harry Potter, one of the main defenses of Harry Potter that arose during that first wave of accusers, often centered on the fact that Harry Potter opened up a lot of children to the world of reading. Kids who thought they were weak readers or poor readers suddenly realized that they were excellent readers because you could motivate them to read the whole of Harry Potter. It had that kind of magical appeal on people. And then I'd also say there's another consequence here that's worth considering about, is that not only like, how does this affect Harry Potter in the classroom? Can we teach should we? Maybe that's a better question of phrasing it. Should we teach Harry Potter? Can we celebrate Harry Potter? Are those still possible? So how did this happen? And that's where I'm gonna dig in a little bit here. So one of the, where do these second set of accusers come from? Because we're talking about events that have happened really over more than a 2-decade span, is that Harry Potter's fandom also aligns roughly with the rise of the internet, the expansion of the internet in the United States, globally for that matter, but also the internet's subcultures and various social media platforms. And what we see here through this is a kind of how moral conviction collides with digital conformity, and also just kind of the first explosion of online debates. And there's two pieces or two platforms we're going to kind of talk about here. And the first one is Tumblr. Tumblr, this was back when everything was like missing the last vowel in the word. Have you ever noticed that? Like the weekend, right? It was a phase, right? Everybody was doing this. But it does look a little dated now, right? But at any rate, 2007 is when Tumblr comes in existence, and it's basically a micro-blogging platform. And it started off as a place where you could really go and just dig into your fandom, whatever that vibe was for you. This then led to people looking and searching and understanding their identity. Tumblr attracted people who were exploring their identities. It also attracted activists. And so we see here this kind of confluence of events where young people are exploring themselves. They're encountering a lot of activist rhetoric and questions. And we're also seeing the rise of various identity groups, many of which we are more familiar with today. And many of these individuals rightly have heightened sensitivity, and some of them have a great deal of what I like to call relish for uncovering offenses. That relish for uncovering offenses thrives on the internet. There was I think one blog called Your Fave is Problematic. In fact, this is really where we get this word problematic from, where this was just a list of celebrities, singers, artists, and it just said what they had done that was offensive. It was a catalog of their various offenses that they had committed. And this got great traction, right? Because that's what you click on, right? That's what you're interested in. What did Justin Bieber do today that I can get offended about? He actually did make the list. That's why I'm using a dated illusion there. That's because he was like young and hot at the time. And so people enjoyed this. I mean, by hot, I mean popular. There we go. I want to clarify that. I'm way too old to find Justin Bieber hot. Tumblr also really skewed very feminine. It attracted a lot of women. On the other side of the aisle, we have 4chan. 4chan is actually technically older, 2003, but its role in this story doesn't really happen until, say, the early 2010s or right thereabouts. And what 4chan really excels at, it's still around and with us today, is being transgressive and being really transgressive and being offensive for offense's sake. People wake up and they're like, what can I do today to offend someone? And they really pioneered text for trolling. This is really where you get trolling has kind of always existed on the internet, but systematic trolling where there are established techniques, this is how we're going to go about doing it. By the way, this is a total digression. Right now, go online, Google Aristotle on trolling. If you have never read this mock Aristotelian dialogue where he explains what trolling is, you are in for a treat. So it is so amazing. I love it so much. But yeah, seriously, Aristotle on trolling. Google it, save that file, open it up later today. You will thank me later. But yeah, and they also pioneered forms of cancellation. And just like we saw with Tumblr, where people got a thrill for uncovering offenses and calling people out, 4chan actually accelerates this even more so in terms of finding different ways of canceling people, call-outs, doxing, outrage cycles, trying to get people fired from their jobs, getting retaliation, swatting people, right? The whole shebang. Now, all of this is taking place on the internet, and I'd say about the height of these years is about 2014. In fact, if you want to, you can go on YouTube and have a lot of self-proclaimed internet historians who will tell you the battle between Tumblr and 4chan. And if you also Google 4chan and Tumblr and click on images, you will see some really disturbing images. So don't do it, okay? But you'll see some really disturbing images of people actually shipping Tumblr and 4chan. It's very weird. This is what I did whenever I researched this for you. So I did this so you wouldn't have to. But at any rate, so what happens is that this debate is really contained online. What occurs is that it starts spilling over onto Twitter. Twitter is a very different platform. Twitter is where journalists hang out. Many journalists are required to be on Twitter. They're required to tweet out. They have to spread stuff. When they discover these debates, they're like, hey, this is news. Not only is it news, but it's stuff people will click on. And what I really want for my publication is eyeballs clicking on my stuff. So they channel these very intensely online debates between subcultures into mainstream news. And that is really like pouring gasoline on a fire. So we can just blame journalists, which I'm sometimes okay with. That's actually a little unfair even to them. But this is really what mainstreams it and blows it up from being what is a fairly niche online debate to being mainstream news and things that normal people actually really know about. But, so that's kind of preparing the groundwork for all of this. There is, of course, J.K. Rowling's role in this herself, right? Is that also what we have during this time period is a rise or the tension between sex-based feminism and identity-based gender, which is occurring in the 2010s. And as probably many of you know, Rowling has a very particular view on this matter. Her feminism does not align with many other people's definition of feminism. And what her perspective is that feminism begins with biological reality and its social consequences. Here's a quote from her: "Women, by virtue of their biology, are subjected to specific harms. We cannot fight for our rights without naming what makes us different." And so she's very critical of ignoring biological sex because it undermines the identity of women themselves, and also the fact that women may be particularly vulnerable to male violence. And in particular, I know I keep saying in particular, but it is a narrow focus, I think, for her, thinking about women in safe locations, right, where are women-specific locations, domestic abuse centers, locker rooms, sports, bathrooms, other places where she is concerned that women would encounter specifically male violence. And she believes very firmly that it was sort of up to her to enter into this debate. And when she, I think I'm missing a bullet point here. But in late 2019, she tweets in favor of a UK ruling about workplace discrimination. That one doesn't really stir up the pot so much, but it does indicate the direction that she's going on. The real controversy arises in June 2020, because if you remember, June 2020 was a super quiet and boring month like many others. That was sarcasm. No, like if you remember, that's like the height of the shutdown. It's the middle of the summer. And she is responding to some COVID guidelines. There we go. COVID guidelines issued in the UK that were about, the phrase that she objected to was menstruating persons. She found this terminology to be highly offensive, and she tweeted out a comment, very sarcastic comment, that this was essentially sort of erasing women. This tweet then really brought a firestorm upon her. She doubled down on it, largely defended it. She eventually penned or wrote or tweeted a much longer sort of essay in support of it, much more sort of thought out. But she has consistently maintained this position over time. And as a result, she received a lot of credible threats, death threats, threats of sexual violence against herself. And she was also denounced from many people in the media, the film cast, and others whom she had previously closer relationships with. And as you may also be aware, and this is like literally happened in like the last week and a half, there's been this ongoing feud with Emma Watson. So this issue has not died down whatsoever. Here's, I guess, my question, right, is that those are the second accusers here. Can Harry Potter still unite? I have this quote here. Tom Felton, of course, played Draco Malfoy, and I think he has a really interesting sort of point here about trying to find some sort of common ground, or trying to understand how can we still maybe embrace Harry Potter. And what I really love here is he says, "I have not seen anything bring the world together more than Potter. She is responsible for that, and so I am incredibly grateful." And I think that's a really beautiful sentiment to think about. How can we think about Harry Potter, maybe sometimes separating the art from the artist, evaluating that separately or keeping that a different discussion, and thinking about, what about Harry Potter and these books themselves? can we still embrace them today? And so I guess my sort of point here is that what does Harry Potter teach that might still make it worth reading? And I think that, wow, that came out a little close there. One of the great teachings that we get out of Harry Potter is resisting authoritarianism, resisting demagoguery. I think this is a consistent theme, how bullying and abusing power are part of human nature. We have the example here, of course, like Malfoy, James Potter. I know, people always want to say James Potter wasn't a bully. He really was. I mean, what he did to Snape is just really, really vicious, right? Empathy for the vulnerable, Lupin, right? Werewolves. Werewolves matter. Dobby, Harry, the Muggle-born. Dangers of propaganda and censorship. You know, we have those sort of examples. And then, of course, the importance of actually advocacy and activism. Hermione's spew, the students' resistance, and Dumbledore's action. Her books teach a lot about courage, self-giving, and really embracing others. And I think those are still themes that are well worth exploring and embracing when we read Harry Potter. And I guess another thing that I like to think about is that the world is a big place. The world is a very big place. And these books are being translated into 80 plus languages throughout the world for all sorts of little kids to read. And somewhere in the world, there is a small child finding Harry Potter for the first time who doesn't know anything about the author's views, who know nothing about her first set of accusers either. And what they're encountering is the story of a boy who is out of place, unloved, doesn't have his family, and who is invited to Hogwarts and who finds a home and a family and learns to really become an amazing person through courage and giving of others. And I think that's a story that is well worth embracing. And that person, again, like I said, the world is way bigger than the United States and even Great Britain. And I think we should keep that in mind. The world is a very, very big place with lots of little kids who can still benefit from these stories. And so this is one reason why Harry Potter, this whole series, has been celebrated and condemned for more than 2 decades. And I think that one of the great things about having banned book weeks is it reminds us that democracy depends on protecting difficult conversations. I think I actually had better notes in my notes, but I think this is where we're wrapping up. Did I do that too fast? Awesome. Oh, wow. I am there is so much time for questions. This is incredible. Although I actually think I will go and stand back here, and then we can put this down here.
Come up to the microphone or raise your hand, and I'll bring a mic to you.
Hello. So how do you think the new series and the trajectory of that is going to impact this discussion?
Hogwarts, Oh, hey, there we are. So I think that's kind of it, is that it's, one reason why you can't cancel, maybe you could cancel J.K. Rowling, but you can't cancel Harry Potter, is there's way too much money in it. This is where capitalism has its benefits, right? It's does that somewhat touch that? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they're recording this for posterity.
And you're right. Anyway, can you touch on how people really viewed J.K. Rowling as a mother to this fandom, as a parasocial relationship, and how that impacted this sense of betrayal when she made those tweets?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, to some extent, everything you said right there is correct, right? So I kind of left out a little bit of the story there, but as part of Harry Potter's rise of fandom aligning with the growth of the internet, J.K. Rowling is unique amongst creators because she really embraced the internet early, and she embraced going online and engaging directly with fans, right? Like, that seems like maybe a commonplace thing for us to do today, is to go online and interact with celebrities or other creators that we really like, but it really was an extraordinarily unique thing where she would go enter chat rooms, and you could, as a fan, directly interact with like this, J.K. Rowling herself, who, and I think there's a reason why I use that phrase, like feminist Cinderella story, right? There really was this kind of larger than life. I mean, all celebrities have kind of larger than life, but she's not like Taylor Swift. She's not that kind of celebrity. She's a writer. Usually writers are not like objects for celebrity themselves. They're like, well, I guess somebody had to have written this book, right? They're kind of the person you forget has to exist. But okay, to actually stay on target with your point here, but yeah, like, so this is why like her personality and her person matters so much, I think, to this story. And she does view herself, I think, sometimes having that kind of den mother attitude towards the rest of a fandom. There's, I know you guys have been reading, listening to that podcast in class, and I listened to it as well, and what really struck me was the sort of romanticization of the early internet, that it was this sweet, innocent, wholesome time, and that, you could just go online and now all was good and well. I don't know, maybe that nostalgia is correct, maybe it's nostalgia, but yeah, a lot of people, I think, did develop this kind of attachment to her, this kind of maternal attachment. The internet's new. We don't entirely even understand all the psychological effects that have really fallen out from it. And so when you can have this kind of sensation or feeling like you're following someone or feeling like you're connected to them, I think that really shifts things. I think it also matters even more so that Harry Potter is geared towards children, but a lot of adults read it. I'm actually too old to have read these when I was a small child. I was, I think, over 15 when I read any of them, right? Like, so I wasn't a small child. And when you listen to people sometimes talk about the relationship with Harry Potter and how they felt found, or how they felt like they identified with Harry Potter, that lonely little boy, I think that encourages this kind of a relationship. And so when you find out that your idol has human feet, or you don't agree with everything that your idol thinks, it can be very devastating. And so I think that is actually a pretty big part of it, is simply not having foreseen that. Okay, I'll digress one more point and we can actually move on, but it's like, so I'm a professor, right? And I have students, and I like my students a lot, but I also try very hard not to become like their friend, to be a friend, but there's that kind of distance there. And so I think it is interesting that people saw her in a maternal way. That's very different than she's just, she's like, when you start thinking of somebody as a mother figure, that creates certain sort of expectations there.
Hi, you talked a little bit about the activism that you see within Harry Potter, but there was a long-term debate about some of the characters within Harry Potter, and specifically diverse characters within Harry Potter. We see characters like Cho Chang, who has a very common Chinese name. We see Irish characters that are, if the British turmoil there, that his entire character is liking to blow things up, and we see a diminishing of Black characters within Harry Potter.
Could you be more specific about the diminishment of Black characters?
We see the only Black Gryffindor character, he's a very much a side character. We see Lavender Brown, she's very rarely talked about, things like that. So I'm wondering what your take on that is, on how that can reflect a little bit of her character prior to all of this turmoil over her actual beliefs?
Sure. Well, part of what I see you're saying here is that we would really like to see greater representation today. And that's a fair criticism or a fair point to make. I would point out that I think part of this is to do with the time frame in which they were made. In the 90s, having like a token character of each of those would have been considered, I hate to say it, acceptable, right? You would have had representation. But I appreciate that point. Today, when we watch movies or when people are casting things or they're developing things, they're going to probably put greater roles for these different characters. That's one reason why in a lot of Marvel movies or DC movies, we've seen race swaps and gender swaps in order to provide that kind of greater representation. I don't know that I would probably push back on some of that, in the sense that I would view it more as a creature of its time, and I would view it less as something to, that there was something faulty in those presentations. They may be limited by our perspective today or what we would ask from our authors, but I don't see the diminishment. I see, you're right, maybe some black characters aren't as large of roles as we would maybe want them to be today, or we want to see greater roles. But I don't see that. And also I would say like a lot of this really is coming out of that Tumblr environment, where we're looking for those things, and most of these are things that we're looking for after the fact. If we could probably time travel to say 2003, it would be probably things like Chinese characters or black characters actually being happy that they were being represented. As much as we might view that as limited today, they would have seen themselves in the stories. And I would think that, like even the inclusion of the Irish character. So I think that's how I would see it, is that our demands from our literature have largely changed.
Do you think you could say the same about the film and how that has also shaped the franchise, and the characterization of characters once you've put faces to them? Because I know that a lot of the concern about J.K. Rowling's characterization came from the films and not so much the books. But the films were also put out after the books.
Yeah.
But do you still think that the characterization is just a product of the times?
Yeah, I think movies are always products of their times, right? Okay, that's a cheap answer. I know. I think that, movies are also very different beasts, right? Yeah, sure, Rowling had input on these characters, right? But like, at the end of the day, that's the director's baby, right? The producer's baby. So there are way more cooks in the kitchen when it comes to a movie. Honestly, when it comes to the movies themselves, she may have had some say in who got cast for what, but honestly, it's like, if you've ever spoken, because I know academics, right? I know historians who have been brought in to consult on historical movies, and the directors and the writers politely listen to what you say, and then they're like, yeah, but like, we're just going to change the history here because it'll film better, right? Like, usually they shove off those people. So I kind of view those decisions as really being the product of the production teams and their outcomes there. That's what they were looking for and how they're making their decisions. And I know that's not a satisfying answer to you, but also it is one of those things where you're making these decisions over time. And those movies took, over a decade to kind of bring into existence. And there's many reasons why they choose the persons that they do. But you are here, I'm trying to give you a more satisfying answer here, which is why I'm rambling. But you are correct that especially because the books themselves don't have often a lot of full physical descriptions, other than we know, like, Harry Potter's got a scar, wears round glasses, right? It is actually Daniel Radcliffe that really gives him that face, right, whenever that occurs. But I'd say that occurs with anything, right? Like, we think of, like, Superman has to look like Christopher Reeves in some form or fashion. Batman's a little different, right? I feel like the world is a big place for a lot of different Batmans. But we also assume that, like, a lot of the Lord of the Ring characters have to look that certain way because of how they were cast. I think that's one reason why it's sometimes useful that we reboot things and recast them, and we can kind of see other different possibilities. We need a world with more Batmans. I don't think that's a very satisfying answer, but I think that's, like I said, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen when you make a movie. And it will be interesting just to connect those points where the series goes, where the new one is going in that respect. Yeah. Oh.
Is Harry Potter what you would call a great book?
Oh.
And if so, what role will the attempt to ban it have in its future?
Well, great is a loaded word. Especially in the context of literature, right? Like, what is great literature? Is this limited to a canon? Is this limited in that kind of way? Yeah, I'll go for it. I'll say it's great. I do. I think Harry Potter's great. I think it's amazing. I think especially if we're talking children's literature, right? Like, I don't think Harry Potter is at the quality of reading John Milton's Paradise Lost, but I do think that, like, it's what it does for children's literature is just, it's extraordinary. I'd say in some ways, and I will stand by this, it's better than things like Alice in Wonderland or The Jungle Book or these other types of, like, quote-unquote classics of children's literature, as good as they are. But I think that Harry Potter is really great simply because of its ability to draw students in, or draw young people into its world, the things that it teaches. I mean, I focus on, when I look at literature, what it teaches. I think all literature is teaching us something. And I think for the most part, Harry Potter teaches us good things. It shapes our moral imaginations. I think most of us get our values and our idea of what's right and wrong largely from the things that we read and we watch. It's maybe our parents a little, but it's largely what we see depicted in what we read and what we watch. Like, we're not largely determining what is good and bad through logical syllogism. And so I think Harry Potter teaches us really good things, things that are valuable, and I think those will live and transcend. I don't think they're going to go away. I do think these are, I mean, I think it'll continue to be potentially banned. I don't think, like, I know right now we might think that the concerns about the occult and the witchcraft are of lesser importance, but I mean, that can come back, right? I mean, anything can come back in terms of people being afraid of it or fearful of it. Ideas are like fashion, right? Now, wide leg pants are back in, skinny jeans are out, right? Like, baby tops are in, and like this is like fashion, right? Like, so fears or concerns about witchcraft may come back. And I think that there's always going to be an appetite for the kinds of things that Harry Potter teaches, and just what it tells young people about, like, being courageous, empathetic, showing inclusion to others, its lessons against tyranny and bullying. I think these are going to resonate. Because, like, what else do you deal with whenever you're, like, in middle school, right? There are bullies and there are tyrants, and recognizing that that's all they are. They are people who abuse their power over others. And those are great political lessons. I think that, I mean, actually, I love Harry Potter because it's so darn political. I mean, it really is kind of incredible. So, yeah, I think it's great literature.
I'm going to indulge in a follow-up question on your second bullet point on the screen there. Protecting difficult conversations. It strikes me the difficult conversations are not necessarily, in this case, within the book,
right.
so much as outside the book, but they're actually not conversations when it comes to social media.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and so comment on that, that ideally, this taking recognition of this is going to make us think about the themes in the book,
right.
But the themes related to this seem maybe to be alongside the book.
Yeah, and that's one reason why I think they won't survive. I mean, I know that that's a really blunt point here, but it's a little bit like no one in this room really cares about the objections to Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal when it came out, right? We're not bothered by the fact that the Catholic Church didn't care for Voltaire when they wrote Candide. I think so. That's kind of maybe an ultimate point is that a lot of these discussions, as time moves on, they will become things that we put in history books, and we will discuss controversy. And you're right, they're not so much in the books themselves. Like, so the problem with Harry Potter is different than like why we might still find like Mark Twain's like Huckleberry Finn with some of the language use there problematic, because like, I don't know, I actually just reread Huckleberry Finn for like a class I taught like last year, and it's like, oh wow, this is a bit rough. I mean, it is some rough stuff, and it's like, okay. I mean, there's I think a point in a defense there, but I think to really kind of dig in on your actual question here, because I think I've evaded it, is that it depends on, in large part, us recognizing that we need to slow down our moral reasoning. We need to recognize that the internet rewards outrage. It rewards this kind of behavior. We need to recognize that we need to find consistent principles, whether or not it's for or against our side. And I'd maybe make another point, because I actually can now remember some of the things in my notes, but and I had to walk away from them. But I think that democracy depends on an idea of like civic friendship. I think this actually is in Aristotle. You can tell I like Aristotle. But he talks about not just friendship later in book 8, but like Aristotle on like friendliness broadly in the city. It's like the ability in a democracy to kind of walk down the street and like view people and sort of smile at them, or be polite, or to just be vaguely friendly. And what I mean by that is that instead of viewing people as enemies and allies everywhere we turn, we try to look at individuals and try to have civil discourse with them. And that puts a burden and a responsibility on us. And I think that's really where it starts. Instead of pointing fingers about others and how they need to change what they do. Remember, the only person you can really change is you. And that we look at ourselves about how can we change civil discourse? How can we look at the motives of others and people we don't like and think about it? Like, to go back to our sort of Christian fundamentalists, I mean, probably no one in this room is that sympathetic to them on the basis of witch cult and whatnot. Were they bad people? They're just people concerned about moral formation and the religious formation of their children. Maybe do we think they overreacted? Sure, but like, or they were wrong? We can think they're wrong, but like, it's also a valid concern. We should look at others and see like, what is the underlying thing? Is there something good that they're trying to protect? Maybe they are going about it in a wrong way that we can disagree with, but to try and better sort of pierce through that and sort of slow down our condemnation. And actually be empathetic, like genuinely putting ourselves in the shoes of somebody else. Does that answer, or did I just do a rambling answer? Yeah, that's awesome.